Most of you probably heard about Cory Booker's record-breaking Senate floor speech earlier this week. If you're like me, you would check in every few hours to see if he was still going, to see if he had broken the record yet, and maybe you would dip into the live stream, see what he was talking about. And again, if you're like me, find yourself staring at the screen you were watching like Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi, screaming, "More! More! More!" Only in a wanting to save democracy way, not wanting to kill Luke Skywalker way. I was a fan of this speech. I will go ahead and get that out of the way right now. I know that there are some folks on the left who are being dismissive of it, calling it purely performative, saying it was just symbolic, it didn't actually accomplish anything. And I suppose that's true. It wasn't even technically a filibuster because Senator Booker was not speaking to delay a vote on a piece of legislation. It was just a floor speech that he kept giving and giving and giving for over 25 hours. It's the same technique as an old school filibuster, and the rules are the same. You have to get up, you have to be on your feet, and you have to be talking more or less continuously, like sort of normal pauses that you would take during a speech are fine, but you can't, take a 5-minute break and then come back and say, it's still the same speech. It's still the same speech. I haven't yielded the floor. So the rules are the same for a filibuster as for the floor speech that Cory Booker was giving, but he didn't actually block a vote in anything. But that's not as important to me as the fact that it did symbolize something very important for the Democrats, for progressives in this country. And it inspired a lot of people to want to get more involved, to have hope, to maybe see a glimmer of light on the horizon. These things are important. Symbols are important. Rhetoric is important. Inspiring people is important. Reminding people what they're supposed to be doing, what they're supposed to be fighting for, is important. And if you're going to do something performative, giving one hell of a performance is important. And I think Senator Booker did that. So all of the things that have been used from the left and the right to sort of undermine or dismiss what Cory Booker did, to me, aren't enough to just write it off as meaningless or of no value. I think all of those things, considered in their proper context, have a great deal of value. But the question is, what do we do next? How do we build on this as Democrats, as progressives? What do we do now? Now that Cory Booker has gotten us all excited, now that he has certainly succeeded in raising his own brand and increasing his own value as a face of the party, as a future Democratic presidential candidate, now that all of that has happened, what happens next? Well, I have a suggestion for the Democratic Party, and specifically for the Democrats in the United States Senate, just as a first step. This obviously isn't the holistic plan that we're going to need to take back control of Congress and take back the White House and start rebuilding and repairing the damage being caused by Trump. But it's a really, I think, practical and achievable first step, and that is do it again. I am dead serious about that. Do it again as soon as possible. It doesn't have to be Cory Booker again. In fact, it probably shouldn't be. Give him a break. He's done his part for now. Pick somebody else. Ask for volunteers. Find somebody who wants to be the next person and do it. And this time, make it a proper filibuster. Make it a floor speech that never ends to stall a vote on a piece of legislation, hopefully one that the Republicans really, really want to pass quickly. That's what should be the next thing. A proper filibuster to delay a vote. And they don't have to break the record. They don't have to keep going to break the record every single time. Although if that became kind of a game for the Democratic caucus in the Senate to see how many times they could one-up each other and give longer and longer floor speeches and do longer and longer filibusters, I'd have no problem with that whatsoever. In fact, technically, even though Cory Booker broke the record for longest floor speech in the United States Senate and took that record away from Strom Thurmond, that racist piece of shit, technically, Strom Thurmond still holds the record for longest filibuster because Booker's speech was not a filibuster. So if anybody wants to step up and try to break the record for longest filibuster and take that away from Strom Thurmond too. Wouldn't that be pretty sweet? I think that would be awesome. And by the way, Strom Thurmond set that record for the longest filibuster in 1957. And as most people know, he was filibustering a civil rights bill. He was filibustering the Civil Rights Act of 1957. And isn't it a shame that in almost 70 years, up until Cory Booker gave his record-breaking speech, apparently nobody in the Senate cared more about anything than Strom Thurmond cared about blocking civil rights legislation in 1957? That's kind of a bummer. But anyway, break that record. Break the filibuster record. Or don't. Just do more filibusters. All it takes is one senator with a big mouth who can avoid sitting down for a few hours, and you can have a filibuster and you can delay a vote on a piece of legislation. And I am saying the Democratic Party should be doing that as often as they can. Am I suggesting that they should do that for every vote where the Republicans are pushing a piece of legislation that the Democrats don't support? Am I saying they should filibuster everything? Every single part of Trump's agenda or the Republican agenda that they try to get through the Senate? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Slow it down as much as you can. If the only thing you can do at this point is slow them down, then that's what the fuck you should be doing. Democratic senators, you should be slowing them. Filibuster everything. The time to take off the gloves is long past. The time to fight dirty is long past. And I know as soon as I say this, as soon as I say they should fucking filibuster everything, there's going to be some dipshit, moderate, centrist, pragmatist, quote unquote, who's going to swoop in and say, but if the Democrats establish the precedent of filibustering everything, then won't the Republicans just do that? When the Democrats have a majority at some point in the future, won't the Republicans just use the same tactic to stall the Democratic agenda? Maybe. Let's see if the Republicans have enough ass to do it. How about that? How about let's not cancel any strategies today based on possible shit that the opposition might do at some undetermined point in the future. Or to put it more succinctly, and to paraphrase General Ulysses S. Grant, stop worrying about what they're going to do to you and start worrying about what you're going to do to them. Ulysses S. Grant, by the way, the Civil War general who won the war. Isn't it funny how in the last 150 or so years of American history, Robert E. Lee has become the more celebrated Civil War general, even though he's the motherfucker who lost. And who did he lose to? Ulysses S. Grant. So that's the motherfucker I quote. That's the motherfucker I turn to for wisdom and advice when it comes to doing battle, rhetorically and otherwise. The guy who won the fucking war. The guy who beat General Lee's fucking ass. Or should I say Colonel Lee, because he was only a general in a fucking pretend army of a rebel state. Anyway, the point is, the Democrats should be doing everything they can possibly do. And if that means repeated, incessant, relentless filibustering of everything, then that's what they should do. And then they should go home to their home states and they should tell their constituents that's what they're doing and that's why they're doing it. They should say, look, right now, because of the results of elections, because of the current political fortunes of the party, because elections have consequences, we don't have a lot of institutional power. I know a lot of you are upset at the Trump agenda, at the Republican agenda. I know a lot of you have been calling on us, your Democratic senators and representatives, to do more to stop it. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have a lot of institutional power that we could use to stop it. But you know what? While we are waiting and hoping and planning and strategizing to regain some of that institutional power, we are doing everything we possibly can. We are doing everything that is within our current power to stall and slow down and block that agenda that is threatening to hurt you and your families. And just think, if this is how hard we are fighting for you right now, how much harder and how much more effective are we going to be able to fight for you in the future if you do see fit through your votes, through your support, to restore us to that institutional power in future elections, to give us a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives, to give us a Democratic majority in the United States Senate, to give us a Democratic president in the White House once again. Think about this. If we are fighting this hard for you now, How much harder are we going to fight for you in the future when we have the power to really get in there and do something and try to turn this thing around? That's the message that the Democrats should be sending to their voters. We're fighting for you now so we can still be here to fight for you later. That's one way to take the symbolic victory, the rhetorical victory, the performative victory of Cory Booker's Senate speech and start to turn it and translate it into more practical, actual, material political victory. That's one way to do it. Use it not just as a tool for raising money, which is fine. They should have raised money off of it. Fundraising off of Cory Booker's floor speech. If they didn't do that, if they didn't try to do that, that would be political malpractice. As much as I hate it that money is so important, is so essential in party politics in the United States, as long as that is the case, the Democratic Party needs to keep up with that. So there's no problem with them fundraising over it. But they need to do more. They need to take it to the people. They need to build on what Booker did and do more of it. They can take it back to their people, back to their constituents and say, here's what we're doing for you, and here's why, and here's what we want to do if you give us more support. If you send us reinforcements in the next election, here's what more we can do for you and to stop these people from trying to harm you and trying to take away your way of life. Because here's the thing, and this is the other big political story from this past week. As we saw in Wisconsin, elections still matter. There was a lot of fatalism after the November election. And I understand it, but fatalism isn't going to get us anywhere. Fatalism isn't going to help. Fatalism is a dead-end street. And as we saw in Wisconsin, when the most wealthy human being on the planet tried to buy himself a seat on a state Supreme Court, and he failed because they elect their Supreme Court justices in the state of Wisconsin. And even though Elon Musk dumped tens of millions of dollars into that state judicial race, which is unheard of, and even though he was handing out $1 million checks to people at campaign rallies, so he's literally buying votes, he didn't win. Their candidate didn't win. The liberal candidate won. The Democratic-backed candidate won. And not by a few votes, not by a few points, by 10 percentage points. Our side won, and won big, because people in Wisconsin who knew better than to allow Elon Musk to buy a seat on their Supreme Court, people in Wisconsin who see what's happening in their state and all around the country, enough of them said, no, to hell with that. We're going to do something about this. We're not going to let them have this too. And they stopped them and they took it back. Elections still matter. We haven't lost it. Again, the fatalism. A lot of people, once Trump won, once Trump was sworn in, once Trump started wreaking havoc with his executive orders and ICE raids and Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency gutting the federal workforce and federal agencies, a lot of people said, it's over. It's over. We're a fascist state now. There aren't going to be any more elections. Fuck it. Give up. Elections still matter. Elections still have consequences. If they didn't, Elon Musk wouldn't have spent $25 million to try and buy an election, a state court election in Wisconsin. He wouldn't have done that if elections didn't matter. And he wouldn't have lost if elections didn't make a difference. And if voters in this country still didn't have the power. We have the power. That was one of the messages of Cory Booker's speech, that the people in power are not as important and are not as strong as the power of the people. And again, pretty words, soaring rhetoric, whatever, but it stands for something. It refers to something that is currently still the truth and needs to remain the truth if this is to remain a nation, if this is to remain a democracy. Cory Booker's speech and the Wisconsin Supreme Court election result, they by themselves are not major victories. They by themselves are not enough to turn this thing around. But what they show is that this ain't over. What they show is there's still some fight in this thing. What they show is we haven't turned this around yet, but we can if we fight, if we try, if we get involved. And if there was one unifying message, one ultimate message to send home to all of us from Senator Booker's floor speech. It was this: do something. And he was speaking to his fellow Democrats. He spoke very eloquently at one point about how the Democratic Party has failed to live up to its responsibilities to the people. The Democratic Party has not done what it needs to do, has not fought hard enough against the Republicans, against Trumpism. It needs to do better. Hopefully it will do better. Hopefully it will draw strength from this. So he was talking to his colleagues. He was saying to his colleagues, and I believe also to himself, do better, do something. But he was also talking to you. He was talking to me. Do something. And if that something is going to a protest, if that's what that looks like for you in the near future, April the 5th. In fact, tomorrow, as I'm releasing this video, Saturday, April the 5th, major nationwide protest here in the United States, and protests, I believe, around the world as well, but focusing here in the U.S., a big one in Washington, D.C., local protests in cities all across the country. If there happens to be one near you that you can attend, and that's something you feel comfortable doing, that's something you're able to do that. Get out in the street. Let people see you. Be counted. Stand amongst allies and friends. Or if you have a podcast or a YouTube channel or a social media following, speak out. Use your voice. Use your platform, however small or big it may be. If you have the time and the inclination, volunteer for an organization, for a political party, for a local union, for a direct action organization in your community that is helping people who are disadvantaged, helping people who are in need directly. Do something. Donate to a political candidate. Volunteer for your local party. Run for office yourself. Whatever that looks like to you, whatever you are able to do, whatever you have the skills to contribute to, or the resources to contribute to, do it. Do something. It has never been more important to do something, to take whatever you have, whatever you can spare, and put it toward the project of defeating the Republicans, of defeating Donald Trump, of saving this democracy from people who intend not just to do it harm, but to strangle it to death. Because that's the threat that we're facing. That's what compelled Cory Booker to stand up for over 25 hours on the Senate floor, to stand up and not shut up for over a day. That's why he did that. But him doing that alone is not going to be enough. That needs to be the lamp that lights the way. And we need to carry it forward if this is actually going to make a difference